Assalamu alaikum, friends and family, and welcome to my YouTube channel, Holistic Fairs. Today we have a very special guest all the way from US, Patrick Farenga. Patrick, do you mind if I call you Pat?
Oh, please do. Yeah.
Great. So Pat is a renowned expert in homeschooling and self-directed learning.
Mhm.
Pat has closely worked with John Holt, one of the pioneers of the modern homeschooling movement, and has continued his legacy of promoting learning without traditional schooling. I made a
Mhm.
short video on John Holt's remarkable work and highlighted key points from his amazing book, Learning All the Time. So please watch out that video too.
Mhm.
Coming back to Pat's introduction, Pat is a writer, a speaker, education activist, and today we will be diving into the um, core principles of homeschooling, unschooling, different alternative education models, methods, and what's the future of education. So, welcome, Patrick.
Thank you. Nice to be here, Faison.
Glad. Great. So, Pat, my very first question to you, since you have more than 42 years of experience within this homeschooling, unschooling, and you have shaped the homeschooling movement. So, can you share the core philosophy behind homeschooling, please?
Well, certainly. Well, a lot of people, when you hear the word homeschooling, it means turning your home into a school or putting a school in your home, however you want to look at it. And usually the first thing that they'll do is, purchase a curriculum. And you could buy, also there are hundreds, maybe thousands of curricula you can buy, and they mimic school. Or some of them are just literally school curriculums that you can adapt as you see fit. Um, but John Holt, as a fifth grade teacher for many years, he felt that the curriculum got in the way of children's interest in learning, and that it cut short or made things too long, because it's one size fits all. It's not designed to appeal to any one person. It's just a generic uh, presentation. So John preferred to refer to homeschooling as unschooling, because what you want to do is keep your home and not turn it into a school. And so the first principle is not to mimic school. There's a lot of practices that you simply do not have to do when you're teaching just your one child, or if you've got a large family, five or six, whatever it is. But it's a completely different dynamic. And rather than turn your home into a school and mimic what's been going on for the last 100 or so odd years of compulsory schooling, John said, look, kids learn before they go to school. Growth is entails learning, and so why don't we work with that? Why do we immediately stop it and say, no, you must think and do these things instead of what is attractive to a child? So I guess a good way of looking at it is curiosity. you know um, you could see this from the minute a child is born. And in fact, as many parents know, there's that famous phrase, curiosity kills the cat. And it's true. When you have a young kid, you've got to watch them. You've got to make sure they're not putting their fingers in the electric sockets and stuff. So yeah, the parent has a role, but it's not the role of a teacher as we know it. It's there's love and concern, and it's a whole different um, relationship, and you can leverage that, and create. I mean, and that's another reason why I think a lot of people are turning to homeschooling, particularly since the pandemic, is that they realize that maybe home life is worth spending some time at home with my kids, other than waiting for them to come back from school and making them do their homework after dinner. I mean, school just has encompassed so much of our lives. So the first thing, is to enjoy your child's curiosity and work with it. Answer this comes naturally. You answer their questions. They ask you what things are, or before they become very verbal, you say, "Don't touch that. Don't do this." They figure this out from these actions and your reactions. So we lose that if we turn our homes into a school. And many people start off doing it because we, just like we tend to parent the way we were parented, and we have to make a conscious effort to like break the bad habits that maybe our parents have instilled in us when we were growing up. Same thing with school. I mean, we don't have to do what was done to us in school. And certainly, if you ever want to find out, it's widely available online in bookstores. I mean, you can find curriculum and outlines. Everyone wants to tell you what, where, and how to learn something. So the lack of information is not an issue. The issue is my child interested in this? How can I help them get interested in this? So it's a completely different approach than just saying, I'm the teacher, you're the student. We're going to pretend that this isn't their house. This is a schoolroom now. And look,
Now,
for some people that works. I'm not going to say that that's the only, my way's the only way. But I do know a lot of parents start off duplicating school in the home. And as time goes on, they become more unschoolish.
fair enough. So, what practical strategies can parents use to implement homeschooling in their daily lives?
Um, well, I guess the most important thing, patience. In school, it's run, school, run. It's a 45, everything's on a schedule, and there's a test at the end. You don't have that pressure. I mean, you can if you want to put it on yourself, but you don't have to. And so having the patience to let your child learn to read at their own pace. Here in the United States, if a child isn't reading by third grade, they're considered a problem. Because so much of school is text based after third grade here, and but there's no biological marker. There's no evolutionary design that we must learn to read by the age of whatever third grade would be. I guess around 8 to 10, around there. You know, so a lot of these guidelines that are there in school are just there because of bureaucratic and administrative purposes, not because and this is why a lot of teachers get in conflict with the administration because they realize that some children need more time or less time, but whether you're advanced or what or behind, you're on the same train. you know so having the patience in understanding that, yeah, might well, let me add to that. So having patience is one thing. And then the next thing would be to start to appreciate the interconnectedness of learning. See, in school, everything gets divided. We have science, then we have a line that comes down, and then we have history, and then a line comes down. Then we have English, literature, and they're all separate subjects, taught by separate teachers with separate curricula. Blah blah blah. Well, that's not how it is in life. I mean, a child crawling is also learning to speak. As they mumble and make noises and pick things up and try to figure these things out. If you're trying, reading is a great example of this. Um, my middle daughter did not. She had meningitis when she was born, and so it affected her hearing, and she had apraxia, so a slight speech delay. And so she was very, reading out loud and sounding out words was not fun for her, and she didn't, you know, really didn't appreciate being pushed when we tried to do those things. So we pulled back, and she got into dance, she got into music. And then when she was 9, she discovered the first Harry Potter book. I forget that title, but it was, that was it. She wanted to read, and she had the reason to read. And I don't know, those Harry Potter books are really thick. They have a lot of pages and words in them. Didn't
Yeah.
daunt her. She dove right in, and that really made her a reader. And you know, I think that's where the patience pays off, and in that interconnectedness again. It's just like teaching them to read doesn't make you into a good reader. It's good books It's wanting to read what's in there. Good
That's
stories
true.
make people get involved in it. Well presented information. I mean, we forget that.
Now, thanks, Pat. Being a very renowned expert in the homeschooling field, you must have met so many families. So, what are some success stories and challenges that homeschooling families face?
Well, in terms of success stories, I think that, well, let me go way back. This is 19. This is maybe the my second. I started work at Holt Associates in 1981, and John started the
Wow.
company in 1977. So and I won't get into my origin story, but the point is, when I was there, I I was skeptical, like anybody. I mean, homeschooling was, particularly in 1981, it was just so off the charts to me, And I was, how are they ever going to do this? How are they going to get in college and whatnot? Well, about 2 years after I got started, a family in Northern California, they were raising dairy goats, the Colfax family. They had four children. Two were biological, two were all boys, and two were adopted. And they basically helped their parents out on this dairy goat farm. And Grant, the oldest, really became adept at caring for the goats and understanding them some medical issues that they had, and he and his family were participated in what's called, I think it's called 4-H. It's an agricultural husbandry sort of organization for families that let's let the children learn more about how to care for animals and farm life and whatnot. And Grant was so respected and for his work that he actually wrote some articles about caring for dairy goats and issues with them and stuff. I think as he was a young teenager. Um, let's fast forward. He applies to Harvard University, one of the top schools here in America, and they were very impressed with his background. And they said, he wanted to be pre med. And they said, well, given everything you know about animal biology and medicine and how you've handled that, we think you're pretty well qualified. So it wasn't his schooling, it wasn't his diploma, it wasn't his transcript, it was his actual work, his portfolio, if you will, his resume. And now we could, after he graduated, he did go to medical school. Then he became a researcher in AIDS, because AIDS in the late 80s and early 90s was really like a driving issue, trying to figure out what's going on with that. And now he's the head of the Department of Public Health for the city of San Francisco.
Oh,
So there's one success story, and there are many. I mean, I always like that one, because even though Grant was so adept and talented at what he did, people still couldn't believe this. And so I remember there was a late night TV show called The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson here in America. It was very popular in the when I was growing up. And Grant got on that show, and because it was so unusual for someone like him to go to Harvard. Now it's, I mean, they've had many homeschoolers go in and graduate from Harvard since then, but that's how unusual it was. But my favorite one was, there was this newspaper called the National Enquirer. It was, and they had a headline about Grant, and it said, "Goat Boy goes to Harvard." Like, people just
that's
can't believe that that you can have that you can grow up on a farm and go to Harvard. It's like, come on, I mean, it's not like prep school all the way, So there are many different ways, and
But what about challenges? What about the challenges that
oh, well,
homeschooling
the
families face?
challenges. Well, I think the challenges are, well, clearly they're a little easier now, because homeschooling is, it's not so unusual to say what's homeschooling. Someone says, "What's that?" I mean, people almost immediately know what you mean. But criticism, that is, as an adult, that's something that you're going to get for homeschooling your kids. It's just considered beyond the pale still in a lot of ways. So you've got to find your community, your tribe, as some people put it, and get that support. I mean, we were very lucky here in Massachusetts. We had a very large, and again, part of that's because I was running Growing Without Schooling magazine, so it was sort of a nexus for people to come in and get information. And plus, we always had a policy of letting the employees bring their children into work. That's another problem. How do you homeschool if you've got to work? All right, so that's something else, and some people work from home and are able to negotiate it. It's very hard for single parents to do that. Yeah, but people figure things out. They use grandparents, neighbors, other homeschoolers. I mean, that's a great one of the great things about homeschooling with others is I can't tell you how many sleepovers we did during the school week, but it was wonderful. I mean, our girls had their friends here, then the next morning they'd be waking up and doing stuff. It was just it was a great experience, but completely different than the mad rush to get everyone out to school, into the car, or out to the bus stop, and everyone's eating as they're going, and packing lunch. I mean, if homeschooling gives you that opportunity to create the life that you want for your family, not the life that mass society expects you to have. Um,
Yeah,
and then another problem is money. I mean, usually the challenge is, well, if you're a two income family and you're going to homeschool, what happens to that income? So that becomes a difficult issue, and we could talk about some ways people have solved that. Another one is I guess driving. When your kids hit a certain age, you know, they want to go places. They have friends who
that's
may
true.
not be nearby, or they have activities like sports or music lessons or classes, that you have to drive them to. And if you have more than one child, you can spend an awful lot of time in your car. In fact, there was a book that came out in the 90s called Car Schooling. I forget the author's name, but I met her. She was a lovely lady from California, but car schooling, could become an issue for you, and that could be a problem, you know. So, and then the other thing is comparing yourselves. I mean, that's another challenge. Everyone is going to compare your child to the child in school. And if you say that, oh, isn't it wonderful how my child can play the piano? They could play Mozart or something, and someone will immediately say, yeah, but they can they do math? Can they do this? Did they learn that? It's and again, there's math in music, there's history in music, there's reading in music. It's all interconnected. But
That's
people
true.
just say, oh, oh no, you're just letting your kid play the guitar all day. That's just ridiculous. How are they going to learn algebra and calculus? Well, I mean, this is the lesson John Holt learned, and that many teachers have written about over the years. Just because you've taught them something and they've passed the test does not mean they've learned it or are going to use it. I mean, we've all been there in school and know that this is true. I've gotten A's in Spanish and I can't speak Spanish. I forgot most of my math except for double entry bookkeeping, the math I do in regular life. But if you were going to give me a quadratic equation or something like that, that would blow my mind. Yeah, but why? Why? Right? I mean, why get upset about that? Because if I needed to, I could learn it. Like right now, I want to learn Spanish, and I'm doing some coursework on it that I've chosen myself because I have a friend in Mexico who invited me to go down and spend time there. And I was like, yeah. I would like to spend the 2 weeks there and and really get to know the language. I don't just want to be a tourist. I want to be a traveler. you know, I
Yeah,
want to
fair
study.
enough.
I
That's
want
a
to
very valid point.
yeah. So, we have to accept that, you know, you don't go to school and you get everything tied up in a neat bow. you know, there's a lot of missing pieces, even though we all got that diploma. And so why do we want to put our kids through that? I mean, John was hoping that schools would change, and he was always using alternative schools. And I know we're going to talk about that in a bit. But one of the things that that I think is important is, as I said earlier, not to compare ourselves. But if we do, then don't compare yourself to the conventional high end schools. What about other schools? I mean, there's Montessori, there's Waldorf. They all have different, Catholic schools. They all have different ways of doing it. Sudbury Valley schools. Oh my gosh! So once my mind gets going, you think of all the variety. So why why can't parents at home pick and choose? And that's what they do. So I know some parents love to do Waldorf stuff at home, and that there's Montessori homeschooling programs and so on. Fine. The more the merrier. The more options we have, the better.
I think you've
So
just touched on the point of alternative education models that I was going to ask. So, what are the most common or famous these alternative education models are in the market, and how does homeschooling compare to these models?
well, in many ways, homeschooling is feeding these models. Um, it's all right. What I mean by that is, first of all, if you want to know more about alternative education and what's available, I was thinking about this as I was, thinking about the questions earlier today. It's on my website, the link, but it's also, you could probably just type this in because Harvard University has now, this is the third year that they've done this. It's called Emerging School Models. And they have a conference that goes over usually 2 days. And they have all these presentations by people who are doing different types of schooling and creating different types of schools, charter schools, micro schools. In the last, and this is the third year they've done it, and I've been to the last two events. And the most recent one was really focused on homeschooling because they were showing public school. Let me use this hand. Public school enrollment is going down, since the pandemic. Private
Yeah,
school enrollment has gone down. Catholic school enrollment has gone down. The one area that's shot up, homeschooling. It's gone up. They were saying during the pandemic, like I think they were saying like maybe 4% of the population is homeschooling. I was like, that's thrilling because for years it was like 1 to 2%. All of a sudden it doubled to 4, but now they're saying it's up to 6%. You know, and
wow.
and, and one researcher says it could be as high as 8. And this is. And what I really appreciate about this conference is not just getting to see all these other models and try to see how they can be helpful, but also the researchers that are there. Johns Hopkins University has what they call the homeschool hub, so you could look that up online, and there's very good data about homeschooling, and it's not biased because a lot of homeschooling stuff. For if you're gonna get your information from me, I'm gonna have my bias towards self-directed learning. They have their biases towards Christian education or Montessori's ideas, whatever. But it was really interesting to hear that. But they all want to capture the homeschooling market because they get the state and federal funds for enrolling those students. And that to me was very interesting how all of a sudden homeschoolers have become a very desirable audience where once upon a time we were like, pariah.
Yeah. As you use this word self-directed learning, what are the benefits of self-directed learning compared to the traditional schooling?
Well, first, it's giving you the the words I want to say autonomy. That's not quite what I mean, but it gives you the ability to feel in control, to say yes or no to something. If you get a great interest, let's say you're playing with Legos, and suddenly you start doing math. Say, oh, 4 Legos is this tall, and then your mom comes out with a ruler and says, yeah, look, that's an inch or 5 inches, and then you get in that discussion. But then that's it. You could say that's, I don't know. I don't want to know any more about that, right? And hopefully in a good homeschooling situation, it would be all right. We respect that. We'll come back. This is the patient's idea. You trust that this is going to happen. And I'm sorry. I'm getting a little lost here.
No,
Uh,
no, that's fine.
Say the question again.
So, as you talk about self-directed learning, what are the benefits of self-directed learning
Yes, the benefits
compared
of
to the traditional
self-directed
schooling?
learning. Right. So, so that's one benefit, is that the child is in control. If they say yes, stop. I mean, please stop. You will. In school, that's not going to happen. The train is on the tracks, and it's going to get to the end of the day, no matter
That's
what.
true.
So that's the first thing. You get the sense of control, that and then the other thing is, you also you also get this idea that the world is open, that you have the ability to explore. You can question. It's if you want to go outside, if your parents say yes, there you go. You could go outside. Not going to happen in school. In fact, here in the States, we've even cut recess. They're arguing about and getting it back. And poor kids in school, it's just like, they're just pounding the instruction. And since pandemic, they're saying the same thing. It's just like, well, these kids are so far behind. They need, I think they call it intensive tutoring. In addition to going to your regular classes. But then at the same, you look at homeschools and unschoolers in particular. Yeah, some of them learn even quicker. I'm always talking about like taking your time, but some kids, this is the other thing about self-directed learning. You get interested. Let's say that Lego project turns into, now I want to see, how can I make it mechanical? How can I put a motor in there and make a car? How would that work? How do I do this? And now, and no one's, and you can do that all day. You can spend the time that you need on that one project, the hour or two, whatever it is, and you can come back to it later that night. You can, it's there for you. Whereas, in school, it's like the bell rings, got to put those Legos down,
Exactly.
on the next thing. So, you get this focus with self-directed learning.
In school, bell rings and you have to switch your mind from maths to science, from science to English. Like you
Yeah,
are taking a deep dive into one subject in half an hour. You have been told, okay, wrap it up. No more maths. Let's do science.
yes,
So,
yeah, that's right. And,
uh,
school run.
so Pat, assume let's suppose you meet a new homeschooling family or a parent that are interested in starting their homeschooling journey for their children. What tips would you offer them to get started?
Well, I think that it's important to find out what you want to do. Why are you homes? Why are you doing this right now? If it's because your kid is in school and having a bad time, and you're taking them out. Well, then you should set up what we call deschooling. Where like you just say, okay, we'll take you out of that bad situation. Let's get over the trauma, whatever. If you're being teased or bullied or whatever it is, let's take the time to work on that. So if they're coming from that, and then another thing is let's say they have a very strong interest in music or science. Find those opportunities in your neighborhood. Maybe you have a neighbor or somebody who could help you, who's an engineer, who works somewhere, that could talk to your child about what they're interested in, and maybe give them some ideas about places to go or books to read. Finding a music teacher. New homeschoolers, should connect with the old, with current homeschoolers, because that's the best sort of source of information about what is going on in your local area. And we're going to talk about technology at some point. So yeah, technology does allow you to like have people outside your local area help you. Great, but we need. I think for me, learning is a social experience. Learning is deeply tied into socialization, and we all know what happens in school when you socialize. So, be quiet. You get the rap on the fingers with a ruler or something. I mean, it's just and that's another reason why John Holt was so fond of alternative schools, and places like that are more home like. The environment is not this institutional, assembly line. It's much more bespoke. So I would advise new homeschoolers to not dive in and turn their home into a school unless they're committed to that, because some are. I I get it, and if it works for you, fine. But it doesn't work for everybody, and you don't have to follow the school's curriculum. In fact, school curriculum changes all the time. Right now, they don't teach cursive handwriting anymore in American schools because they felt like technology and these other subjects they needed more time to teach them. So that and then the rationale that schools gave was, well, kids learn cursive on their own. And I was they'll admit, so when they cut something, then they say, "Oh yeah, the kids will pick it up." But oh no, they'll never pick math up. They'll never pick reading up. They'll never pick up science. It's like we science, math, and they're all around us. That's part of our lives. You walk. I live in the city, so you walk by an electric substation. I remember like my kids, one of my daughters said, "What's that noise?" This humming from the electricity. And so I didn't know exactly what it was. I knew it was some sort of generator, but so we looked it up together. Oh, it's what they call a substation, and that's the sort of way that we get into science, as homeschoolers. So I would advise newcomers to start like with a purpose, like
Yeah.
and then move through that, because your children and your lives are going to change once you start this. You're going to be meeting new people. You're going to find other friends that, for your kids. So it can be daunting, but it's the same as if you took your kid out and put him in another school. You're gonna
That's
have to
true.
find new friends and make new, as parents and children. So don't be scared, and it's not an irrevocable decision. I know many homeschoolers just feel like, oh, school's evil, but we've always had the approach of a swinging door between our home and our school, in the public schools here, and the private schools. I mean, my kids have chosen. They had good reasons, to go to the school, and then they had good reasons for leaving. So my youngest daughter spent, I think, 3 weeks in first grade and 6 weeks in third grade. And then I mean, you can pull your children out, and or put them in. People move around the country all the time, and their kids have to come in and out
Yes.
of schools. So you're not going to do any great harm to them by doing this, and in fact, they might appreciate it because you're showing them a model of how to be a proactive parent. You're not just following the rules of everybody else sending their kids to school. You're saying, oh
Yeah.
well, if it doesn't work for you, we'll do something else.
Sure. So let's suppose if they start this homeschooling journey, how can they balance educational freedom with meeting academic goals? Because they're most concerned about, oh yeah, we need to follow a particular curriculum, the state they live in, and the moderator comes once a year or twice a year to make sure the child is on that path and learning as per what's their minimum standard. So how do they balance this educational freedom with meeting academic goals?
Well, the the short answer is they look at, and again, not every school district does this, but this was very common in the 80s and 90s when we were homeschooling, and that is, if you're worried that your child doesn't know much science or math or whatever the subject is, get a hold of the curriculum. Look at what they are actually learning in that grade. And in the public schools here in the states, your local public library will have your local school's curriculum outline, not the whole detail, just the topics. What's going to be covered each week, and you'd be surprised how much you're covering already. And the nice thing is, as I said earlier, if you're not covering it, you can get it later. There's no law. I mean, it's because your kid is in school. If they're not reading by third grade, it's a problem. But if you're homeschooling and they're not reading in third grade, you know, it's okay. As long as they're learning other things and they, and they're happy and social and so on. What's the worry? They're going to learn to read. You know, many again, to go back to alternative schools. I mean, a lot of them, late reading is a very common experience, and they're very comfortable with it. I know in the Danish school system, I don't know if this is still true, but in the '90s, '80s and '90s, when I had a friend who was over there, and they were like, yeah, I mean, they may not learn to read until eighth grade, but they will learn by eighth grade. No one graduates from our school without learning to read, was what this teacher said. So they have a longer time frame. But I don't know, when we turn education into a manufacturing process, we also view our children and the teachers differently. And I think that we need to look at it as a human process, as something that we do, and that and most importantly, we have to figure out the community, being me, but also us. And that's the big thing. What about socialization? They say, well, school socialization is, you know, it doesn't work for everybody, and bullying, as we know, and poor kids, with bad self-esteem commit suicide and so on. I mean, these are not uncommon issues anymore. It's very, and then you throw in here in the states, with school shootings. I mean, it's it really is hard to say that the social life of schools is desirable. It needs to be changed. And that's a really big aspect, I think, of helping your child learn, and also for you as an adult. You have to make friends, new friends, because hopefully your friends from the school will still talk to you. But I'm more than aware many people just get ostracized when they decide to homeschool, but then they find a
Yeah.
new group of friends.
Yeah, as a homeschooling parent, when we had a meeting with our moderator, the moderator expressed that our son is lacking some basic thing in phonics, and she said, don't worry too much about it. With time, they learn. So this
Nice.
was the feedback. And in terms of the socialization, like my son, he goes to the homeschooling community group they have here every Monday. Tuesday, he has swimming class where he socializes with his friends. Wednesday, I think he has a soccer game. Thursday, he goes for squash. Friday, I think some other sports. And
Hmm.
weekends, we usually go out, hang out with other friends. So that's
Yeah,
the socialization part a homeschooling child is experiencing.
yeah, yeah. It's wonderful. Yeah, and what why would anyone say that's an inadequate education? But and it's funny you say this, because I forget when it was. I think it was Tuesday night. I spoke to a group of Irish homeschoolers, and we were doing it over Zoom, and they're largely unschoolers, and they were very worried that whenever they get evaluated, they said it's tightening up in Ireland. And so when they get evaluated, they say exactly like where I thought you were going to go with the phonics issue. They say, well, your child is weak in phonics, so they need more structure. They need more structured lessons, and and they would emphasize to use the textbooks and all this other stuff. I love that attitude. It's like, give them time. It's like
Exactly.
a pediatrician, right? I mean, a good pediatrician knows it could take children learning to walk. It could take everyone learns to walk at different months and different times. Say that, if they're not walking by X, at this time, there's an issue. you know Patience.
So That's true. That's true. So, Pat, do you recommend any resources for the new homeschooling parents?
And say that again.
Do you recommend any resources for the new
Oh,
homeschooling parents?
there are so many resources for homeschooling parents. Um, if in our magazine, Grown Without Schooling, which was published from 1977 until 2001, we always had a directory of families in there, and the families would list the ages of the first names and birth years of their children, so that you could find pen pals or people. And also they would put down their interests and so on. So that was one way that they stayed in touch. With the internet, you would think that that would be even easier, and in some ways it is. You know, um, and what was the other thing I wanted to say on that? It was did I make a note on it? No. Oh yeah. The other resources. I mean, we were talking about like buying curriculum. Goodness, that's easy to find on the internet. The curriculum. But the other thing is like groups, activities. On the Holt GWS website, I have you know listings state by state and country by country of homeschooling support groups. So you can find somebody to talk to if you're interested in homeschooling or you're having an issue and you need someone to get an outside of perspective, and as well as activities for teenagers, travel opportunities, apprenticeships, um, and then for younger people too. So there's a lot of resources out there, and I think there's going to be more because there's less and less children. The birth rate's going down around the world. And so I think that we're going to find more and more of these resources available for families that are looking to have more meaningful time instead of just sending the kid to school. And I think schools will be able to take advantage. I mean, this is the thing. John Holt was always saying schools and homeschoolers can form a fruitful partnership because homeschoolers are showing schools other ways that children can be
True.
socialized and integrated into society. So let's work with that. But of course, they've been fighting it. But now with emerging school models and other things, in the pandemic again, I think that there might be a willingness to change. But Germany and France have banned homeschooling in recent years, so it's not a slam dunk as to use a basketball analogy.
Pat, let's talk about the technology and future of education. And you mentioned you're going to be touching upon the technology part. So, what role does technology play in homeschooling?
Well, it right now when we say technology, we mean doing classes through Zoom. We mean I remember back in the late '90s, my oldest daughter Lauren. The internet was very popular and stuff, and she wanted to go to college, and so it was like, well, okay, you're gonna have to take a college entrance exam, and she hadn't had many, if any, standardized tests up to that point. So we signed her up for a course called the Princeton Review, which my wife and I thought were a wonderful. It looked great to us, but when Lauren sat down at the computer in 1998 or '99, she hated it. She just couldn't stand it. It was just it was like you said, it was just school on steroids coming at her. And there wasn't another person. I mean, there was someone you could email with questions, but nothing live. So now I think that that's improving. Although we saw in the pandemic that the way the schools are using it, I think the way homeschoolers are using it, trying to leverage Khan Academy like math and then put it into the real practice at home. Don't just leave it on the screen. Don't just check it off like you would in school. Okay, I spent my hour doing math. So I think that that's an important part of technology is how do we let kids explore with it? How do we give them opportunities to manipulate it? I mean, Seymour Papert wrote his book Mindstorms back in the early '80s, and it created and he was all about creating programming for kids. That exists now. That's all out there, and we should let our kids have access to it. Um, I mean, we use computers as adults. It would be like, if they lived on a farm and we wouldn't let them use any farm instruments or tools, until they went to school. It's like, no, you know. So, but the problem is, and I think that again, it varies, because some kids are just going to get complete. I've known some dear friends of mine have children like this, that they're into the computer. That's it, and but in a good way, like they're learning programming, or they're using it to make videos and movies, or using it for creative purposes. Or, as one friend of mine, his son Willie, he started selling magic cards online, and he created a whole business by the time he was 14, wheeling and dealing the magic cards. And that's another thing. We forget that, opportunities for business. Kids want to know how to make money. They know how important it is for us. So, homeschooling gives you that opportunity. There's a free book on my website, GWS.com, called Earning Our Own Money. It's something we published in the 80s, but I still think it's valuable. And it's kids writing about what they did, and some of it's very creative. Yeah. One of them, certainly babysitting, but another one was about, taking the garbage out for all the neighbors, and getting paid to do that, and putting the can back. Another one started a newspaper. I mean, there are all sorts of very creative things that kids will come up with, if we just get beyond the idea that they have to do it sitting at a desk with a textbook. And technology can free that, but unfortunately, most of the education technology stuff duplicates the school textbook model. But there are. I have hope that we'll get past that.
Yeah. Few months ago, my son, the place homeschooling playgroup he goes, so they organized the children market where children were supposed to make something and sell. So
There you
that helped him to learn about communication skills, time management, how to deal with customers, how to manage sale and count money,
go.
return the change to the customers. So that was an amazing experience for my son and other kids within that community
Yeah,
to learn just from few hours of that children stalls, children market. So
yeah.
your science, your English, your maths, everything was involved with this, with just one activity.
Yeah, yeah. I know at one point, there were a few years where we would have a holiday fair, and my girls and their friends, they'd all be making things for sale at that fair. I mean, it was really like a good 3 or 4 week lead up, where they're getting excited about this. And then when it was all over, like, who sold the most? Who did this? What did you buy?
Yeah,
You know?
no, that was
So
amazing.
yeah,
But yeah, what are your predictions for homeschooling and other learning models? What do you think? What's going to happen in the future?
well, it's kind of, it could go in so many ways, but I'm going to take the positive look. You know,
Okay.
I don't want to, to say, boom to tomb schooling is what's going to happen. You know, uh, what I would like to see is that not everyone wants to homeschool, right? And it's going to take forever for people to get out of the idea, because it's been 150 years almost of compulsory education. So I hope that we get away from the idea that we have to force children to learn by forcing them into school, and instead, realize that learning is part of life, and that, we can have many, many, many avenues, many different places to come in. So instead of just having one school where everyone goes and follow, I'd like to see like a whole bunch of little ones, or a big school. It's that, but it's not a school. It would be more like, well, John Holt wrote about this in his book Instead of Education. And the subtitle is Ways to Help People Do Things Better. It's not about getting higher grades. It's about how do you make your life better. And one of the things that he cites in there is a place called the Peckham center, and it was popular in England from the 1930s until the 1950s. And essentially, it was these doctors who set up. They wanted to find out what are the conditions that will keep people healthy and active and happy, and give them pleasure. Because I mean, that's another thing that I really want to emphasize. We didn't talk about this, but going back to like kids in the fair and doing stuff like that, they have a purpose. They have a purpose in life. And and that's what I think misses, from a lot of school. What's the purpose? Well, the purpose is to get a better grade than somebody else. The purpose is just not to get in trouble. you know, Purpose is to be quiet and listen. I mean, yeah, those can be short-term goals that we may need to do, but my gosh, I mean, that becomes the be all and end all for so many people. But now we find a purpose, and I think that helping children find their purpose will, and it'll change. It may be music and tap dancing for a year. Then it could be math. Then it could be like helping elderly people, or working. One of my favorite books in recent years. Oh gosh, I forget the title, but it's by Ben Hewitt,
Yeah.
Hewittt, and it's about his children growing up in rural Vermont, and they get fascinated with the idea of trapping. Trapping animals, and they become expert trappers by the time they're young teenagers. And that's something that who would think? But I was so happy to read this. It's like, yeah, you never know where these things will go if we allow our children to find a purpose to do these things. And so I hope that through technology we could show people more ways of doing things. One of my personal favorites are these videos that show people making things, but they do it in two, they'll show like two guys building a house, in using just like vines and hatchets and stuff, not modern construction stuff. And they'll speed it up, so in about 5-10 minutes you see the whole construction. And that's, I mean, that I think would be inspiring to some kids. They immediately want to grab a spoon and go in the backyard and start digging. you know uh, so technology, we have all these things at our fingertips now, but instead,
Yeah.
we're not thinking of them as inspirations as much as we're thinking of them as, oh yeah, this is how they're going to get a career in architecture. It's like they're 10. Give them a break. I mean, anyway, I won't tell that story, but go ahead. I'm
Sure.
talking too much, Faizan.
No, 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 all good, Pat. I think I'm done with all the questions I prepared for this amazing podcast. Is there any last message you want to say to our audience?
I would say, don't be scared to try homeschooling. It's not an irrevocable decision. You can homeschool for a week and then say, I give up. Or you'll find, it's a year, or your child decides that they want to, go to school, and you figure out, is this the right thing? And people get sick. This happens, and so sometimes homeschooling has to end, but that's okay. You could start it up again. Like I said, my kids came in and out of school, and it wasn't constant, but it can happen. So don't think that you're closing doors and cutting off opportunities for your children. It's actually the opposite, and for you too. If just get out of the school mindset and say, this is an adventure that me and my children are going to have, that is not that not everyone does. I mean, so I would really encourage you to try it. Like I said, it's not an irrevocable decision, and you might find that you create a different type of home life, and that it's a little calmer for you and for your kids. So you're more in control of your schedule, and so on. So don't be afraid. dive in. People have been doing it now. Now there's something like there are millions and millions of families doing it right now all around the world. You know, even in countries that
Exactly. As
ban
we dived
it.
in,
I'm sorry.
yeah. No, no, sorry, you go. I didn't mean to cut you. I was saying, like, even we as a homeschooling parent, not a single time we regret or why we are homeschooling or we should have sent our son to school. We are enjoying and we are very proud of everyone involved in this homeschooling journey. Not us, the community that we go to, the other families that supports us, our parents, his grandparents from both sides.
Oh,
So
that's
the amazing
wonderful.
support we have received, yeah, we are very proud of everyone's support.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Yeah. And that can happen for other people too, right? That's
True.
wonderful.
True. Pat, it's been a pleasure speaking with you today. And I'm sure our listener will enjoy this amazing, lovely conversation on homeschooling topic. Thank you for sharing your wealth of knowledge, experience with us. If people want to reach out to you, how they can find out more or listen to your s- speeches or any work, amazing work that you do for the community.
They could go to my website, johnholtgws.com. And there, if you give me your email address, you'll get a free pamphlet, booklet called John Holt's 8 Great Ideas About Unschooling. And it's, selections from John's work that I think emphasize, how unschooling will work for you.
I'll make sure that I write in the YouTube video description your website, your email address, and everything that you would like to be included in the description. So that's from us. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening to this podcast. Hopefully, we'll see you in the next video.